Hi, everyone. My name is Charity. I'm a former consular officer with the U.S. Department of State, and today I'm here to talk about the top 10 red flags in F1 student visa interviews. So these are things that can make consular officers doubt whether or not the person standing in front of them qualifies for a visa. So let's get the list started. Probably the single biggest red flag that any consular officer is going to encounter in an F1 student visa interview is when the applicant can't answer questions about their decision to study in the United States and their decision of school or program, right? Consular officers know it's expensive to go to school in the US. It's far away from home for people traveling from other countries. And so they're going to expect an applicant to be able to explain why they've decided to study in the United States and how they came about to choose a particular university and course of study. So anytime an applicant struggles to explain that to the officer, it's going to raise some concern about whether or not this person truly intends to be a student. Other types of things that can raise red flags are that could occur after if someone has applied for a visa and isn't successful or is refused and then applies again, but then changes things right away. So for example, in the past, if I had a visa applicant who came to me, who maybe applied last month or 6 months ago to attend a different school and study a different program, now they're back with a whole new school and maybe a whole new program. That seems like an unusual change to make, particularly in a quick amount of time. So that would definitely raise a flag for me. One of the biggest things that Americans know about going to college in the United States is that it is expensive. And so consular officers will absolutely expect that applicants know the financial aspect of what they want to do. So that includes the costs that will be incurred, both tuition and fees, and to live in the United States for the entire length of their course of study, but also how they're going to pay for that. And I understand that in some places, and particularly in certain cultures, it's not something that many young adults are comfortable or even discuss with their family members. But this is a case where a consular officer is absolutely going to want to hear that the student knows to a certain degree how much it's going to cost for them to go and study in the US and how they're going to pay for that. In general, a big red flag are vague or generic answers to really basic questions about the student's plans for studying and afterwards. So, it wasn't that uncommon for me to ask somebody, well, why did you choose this university? Or how did you learn about this school? And have them say something like, well, I saw it on the internet and it looked nice. Well, yeah, it might be a great school, but that doesn't seem like a really legitimate answer to how somebody chose one university out of the more than 4,000 in the United States. So we understand that sometimes people are a little hesitant if they've used maybe a service to advise them on how to, find the right university for them. Maybe they learned about it from a friend or saw something actually on the internet, but they should be able to talk about it. Typically, when people are giving very generic or bland or vague answers, it makes consular officers wonder if they're really being honest. And that brings me to another major red flag. And that's when applicants are being deceptive about anything, even if something doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. Anytime an applicant says something that is provably not right or not accurate, it's going to make the officer wonder, what else might they be not telling me the whole story about? And typically, I saw this kind of behavior when it came to questions about, for example, family members in the United States. I know that there's a lot of advice out there on the internet and from friends and, things like that that'll say, oh, don't ever tell officers that you have family in the U.S. But if you do have family in the U.S. and you don't tell the officers, and they're able to determine that, it's really going to put some major doubt in their minds about how honest students are being in the rest of the answers to the questions. Another red flag for, in some cases, could be an extremely limited English ability. Most universities in the United States are going to require a written exam in English, but that's usually done in the home country. Consular officers understand that many applicants are very nervous when they come to the interview window. So we just certainly don't expect perfect English. But when an applicant struggles to understand the questions from the officer or struggles to give their answers in English that could be understood, then that can raise some concerns about whether they have sufficient English ability to be a successful student in the United States. Another major flag can be behaviors or choices that the applicant is talking about that may seem to conflict with what officers experience in that country as culturally appropriate. One of the reasons why American consular officers live in the countries that they do is that they can get a much better understanding of what's culturally correct in that country. And so if it's a country where it's extremely unusual for unmarried young women to live anywhere but with their parents, then it might seem like a strange choice for an unmarried young woman to come and say they want to go live by themselves in an apartment 5,000 miles away in the United States. Doesn't mean that that's not the case, but there would need to be some more information, right? And that brings me kind of to one of the key things here. All of these red flags are things that in some cases can have legitimate exceptions, or what I mean is that legitimately that is the true story for the person. And what's important to remember then is that every applicant's story is their unique one, right? And that's what officers want to hear. They need to make sense. If somebody in their own situation truly has one of these things that I've raised as a potential flag, right, that doesn't mean that they don't qualify. But that circumstance should make sense in the rest of their story, right? So for example, if it's a young unmarried woman, but who has siblings living in that city in the United States who can help take care of her and oversee her like her family would back in their home country, that might make more sense for that individual. One of the things to keep in mind is that visa interviews are often very quick and officers are listening for certain pieces of information. And so I have one last red flag, and this is one that I personally encountered a few times, and that's what we call sort of forum shopping. This tends to occur if somebody has maybe applied for a visa, been refused in their home country, or maybe they're concerned about being able to qualify for the visa in their home country. So they travel somewhere else to another country to apply for their visa. And sometimes there are very legitimate reasons for doing this. If time is running out and there aren't appointments available in time to arrive at the school, then sometimes traveling to a nearby country may make it possible. But other times it can seem that they're maybe trying to go to a place that the interviewing officer doesn't know as much about their home country. So they're not looking for those culturally unusual behaviors. And officers are going to see any record of applications that somebody's had previously. So they're going to know if they, went to the embassy or consulate in their home country, were refused, and then have come to another place. So like so many things, it really just depends on what your individual story is. But the best advice that I can give to avoid raising red flags for the consular officer is take the time to understand for yourself exactly why you want to go travel and study in the United States, and what you plan to do with that education, and how you're going to make all of those arrangements happen. If you know those things and can communicate them to the consular officer confidently in your best English, chances are you're going to be a successful candidate.